Well, welcome to Bits and Bants, the developer marketing podcast. This week's guest is someone that I've looked up to for just about as long as I've been in the space. The one, the only Katie Miller. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. I'm thrilled to have a chance to chat and nerd out on all things DevRel and dev marketing with you, Gary.
I appreciate it. I feel lucky. This is the second time I've seen you in like 4-6 weeks. So good to be here. I think just to get started here, you have one of my favorite journeys in the space. You came from the education field where you have a master's degree from Stanford, which is super impressive on its own. And then from there, you parlayed that into building some of the original developer programs at Google. You were there for 15 years, took that experience, stood up programs at Asana, Slack, and just a really impressive background. Tell us a bit about that story just to get started. How does one end up making that transition from education to developer marketing and then being as successful as you have for as long as you have?
Oh, well, thank you. It's interesting because the journey, when you look at it, each element on its own, it can feel very random. My first long stretch career-wise was at all places a dental school. So shout out to Tufts University, go Jumbos, and ended up falling into that opportunity through a temp agency. It was right before the first .com bust. I moved to Boston on a whim because I had a bed and a roommate and I needed a job. And I had done some admissions work as an undergrad. And so they placed me there. And I was like, oh, I'll just be here for a few weeks while I look for something else. And it converted into a 4-year stretch. It's what brought me out to California because I was able to do some policy and legislative work for dental education and oral health care. And that's actually what I focused on when I was at Stanford, was policy organization and leadership studies. And that, was what brought me out to California, thinking that that would be what the journey was. And I needed a job. There is a trend here of needing employment. And there's a little bit of a lesson in here, especially for those listening, which is the importance of seeing what each job can offer in terms of skills, in terms of connections, in terms of industry, and in terms of transferable knowledge. And so a friend referred me to Google. And I'm going to tell a fun story here because I think it shows the journey. She's like, yeah, I work at Google. I said, oh, you're an engineer, right? And she's like, no. Tech companies hire people who are not engineers. And this was 20 years ago. So it goes to show you how wet behind the ears I was when I moved to California. And I started my career over at Google and was able to piece back together the dots of what did I love in admissions? Mm-hmm. And it really was my catchphrase, which is providing people through programs and experiences the information that they need to make good decisions and be successful. So in the context of dental education, that was at the time, you're going to spend $250,000 to become a dentist at our school. Mm-hmm. How can I make sure that we are the right school for you? For advertising, which is where I started at Google and ad tech, it was, how can we make sure that you are using our ad tech products as best as possible to really drive your business forward? So it feels so obvious I ended up in DevRel and dev marketing because that is what the practice of dev marketing is, which is you're building stuff for your customers, you're building stuff for your companies. You want to make sure it performs, that it is stable, that it is secure, that it has a great user experience. And we're asking you to put a lot of trust in us. And so we need to give you the information that you need to make good decisions and be successful as a developer on our platform. So that's my journey.
Which the overlap, like you said, makes a ton of sense. Going to dental school, very expensive decision, very expensive investment for a lot of developers. Building tools, picking platforms, same thing. Very expensive process, very expensive investment, and something you want to make sure you have all the info for, right?
Exactly.
That we've known each other for a long time, and I've never heard that nuance of the narrative. So this has already been time well spent on my end.
Well, thank you.
I want to fast forward a little bit to now, right? We've kind of talked about this career you've had, how you got there, and we're in this situation now where developer marketing it's a relatively new field, right? Depending on who you ask, it's been around maybe 10, 15 years in different iterations. And where we're at now, at least how I see it, is we have a lot of brilliant mid-career practitioners. They're in the space, they're doing it, they're kind of grinding, working on programs, all of this sort of stuff. But we have very few people who have really shifted into becoming champions for the industry. And you, if I may be so bold, are one of those champions. You're currently working as an ambassador for the Developer Marketing Alliance. You're a founding member of the Developer Relations Foundation. You speak frequently at CatchyCon, other conferences. And among that, you've still found time for various advisory roles. So how did you find yourself going from a practitioner in the space for so long into this new chapter, new stage of your career?
Oh, that's an interesting one. And in some ways, it actually was a return to education that created a space for me to do this. I was at a pivotal moment in my, what I call corporate 9 to 5, in terms of growth opportunity, and asked myself the question of, where will I have the most impact? And can I financially take this leap? Which I like to put that caveat in there, because I am fully aware that it is easier said than done to make a leap like I have. I had an opportunity to chair the board of trustees at our kids' school. And the way I wanted to do that chairperson role was to be able to fully lean into it as much as the head of school and the community needed me to do that. And I was in a place that I could do that. And in parallel, was really starting to recognize, having been at Google, Asana, and Slack after the Salesforce acquisition. So in some ways, seeing two different cultures and companies there, seeing where there were patterns, seeing where there were trends. And interestingly enough, companies were reinventing the wheel. And not only were they reinventing the wheel kind of within their own business units, but it felt like they were almost going through the same cycles every couple of years. So I felt like if I could use the time, my professional time that I was not doing the chairperson work, to think about how to build up that muscle memory for others, to be able to share, dare I say, the good, the bad, and the ugly from my own experience, so that people didn't feel like they had to figure it out alone. That they knew that there were tried and true best practices, that there was community, that there was growth. And probably, and I know that you know this better than anyone, this is a space where one of the big questions over and over again is, why do you exist and what is your impact? And so if there was a way to build that muscle in particular and show folks that there are lots of different paths in here, it's an incredibly valuable practice, and here's how to do it well without needing to figure it out all on your own. It felt like a really good use of time.
And obviously, I think, I'm a big believer in the impact that you've had, and a lot of these organizations have had. You mentioned it a little bit, but some people come into this space with the intention of, I want to be in DevRel or dev marketing, and they've just loved it. They've loved technology. But I think a lot of people also kind of stumble their way into this space, right? Like you said, a lot of your journey I was looking for a job, and this was the job, and I ended up liking it and being good at it. And for a lot of those people, a lot of the questions we get are like, where are the resources? Who can I go to learn? Where can I go to find out more? So I think maybe a good question to ask you, as someone who's so involved in the community, is give us an overview of some of these organizations you're working with, what they offer, what they provide, and what people who might be looking for answers or community can expect to find within these different organizations.
I think that's I love that question. And in many ways, it's the genesis of why a group of us did start working on an open source driven foundation that once it fully launches will be part of the Linux Foundation, because as we did that audit of programs and resources, it's really fragmented. And even more so over the last few years, as there's really been this explosion of folks doing fractional work, building up their own consulting practices, their own expertise, is that question of, and also I would say the demise of Twitter/X for it being a public space for sharing knowledge and community. And so there have been economic shifts, like social media platform shifts and career shifts and so forth that have made it even more diffuse, I would say.
Sure.
But my go-tos, and for folks who are listening, I hope as they review and so forth and join the conversation, they comment on their own as well. The first is the Developer Marketing Alliance, which sits within the broader alliance. That is an organization. It is membership driven and membership based, so there is a cost there. The way a lot of the community elements are free. You can attend some of the virtual events for free. You can be in Slack and so forth. I like to think of it as professional development, so folks can kind of look at price and bristle, and yet at the same time, it's in many ways upskilling, continuing education, and so forth, which is why I feel like even though there is that cost membership barrier between promotions they have, hopefully opportunities for companies to support you and so forth, that there is a really valuable upskilling to that. And so I feel like that's a really good first place to start, because it's centralizing and bringing people together to share knowledge, to share content, and build community. The Developer Relations Foundation, that is a very different tact, which again is taking more the principles of open source. So creating a space in which folks are really driving the creation and aggregation of content. And so it's a different financial strategy, a different engagement strategy. And yet at the same time for that one, there was again this recognition, especially on the DevRel side of the conversation, that there was no central force moving forward the professionalization of DevRel. And it was one of those things, every time a company had a new leader, every time they're like, why does your organization exist? What are you doing? And so forth. And so to be able to have a body that you could point to, that you could be involved in, that was really legitimizing, professionalizing, that if folks engaged in it, if you hired someone who was involved in it, or your company was educated and engaged by it, you knew that you were getting good people and good practice. Beyond that, there's DevRelCon, which usually happens a couple times a year. Major League Hacking has been involved in that, at least in the US version. That is a great in-person opportunity to build community and connection and engagement. And they bring together an extraordinary cohort of speakers. And then beyond that, there are organizations that I greatly respect that do create communities, such as Catchy. So thank you very much for what you do there. I've been a huge fan of Slashdata and the work that they do, dating way back to when they were Vision Mobile, and really pioneers in the mobile development research space when that did not exist. Evans Data, some of the stuff Dev Network is doing. And now as I rattle on and on and on, you can see that there's a lot of decentralization with this. And again, hoping that hubs like the Dev Marketing Alliance, the DevRel Foundation can at least be the hub to connect together these spokes so that folks don't need to find it on their own.
The hub and spoke model is such a good way to talk about it, because we really view it as do I think a lot of the other companies and organizations that you've mentioned. It's really a holistic ecosystem, right? And there's different vendors and organizations and groups that kind of fill different parts of it, but the sum is typically greater than the individual parts of that, right? And you get some parts of the experience working with, Major League Hacking, and other parts with Slashdata. Catchy fills another part of that, but the whole of all of that is so much greater than those individual parts, and that's why I love it, because it's a tight-knit community. everyone knows each other. We like working together. You know, we like most of the people in the space, and that's kind of what makes it fun from my end, at least.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to add one more point, which is I think because we've all gone through a thing the last few years, I was thinking about this before we joined, since this is a practice that, in my opinion, rightly so, does not have direct revenue responsibility. It's very easy to question at a time of wanting to cut back on budget and lean resources and be efficient. Why do you exist? And so in many ways, we need each other more than ever to, again, strengthen numbers and legitimacy. We all believe it, but the larger an organization, kind of a collective body you can put forward, I do believe the more companies will see that this is a really, really valuable part of moving the business forward, especially if your business has any element of platform to it. It can't just be a slide with logos on it. It can't just be an add-on where you throw up some documentation. If you truly want an ecosystem, you need a really, really strong practice. And that's where I really hope that generally positive vibe and collective goodwill in the community will keep us strong and move us forward.
Well, and that's a really good transition to kind of my last question here, which is almost a bit full circle. We have, you know, like we said at the top, we have a lot of practitioners, but we don't have a lot of people who are kind of in your shoes and being more of that champion for the community. So what advice would you give to people who are looking to get more involved in the broader industry with some of these organizations? What would be kind of your words of wisdom to pass on to them?
Ooh, that's a good question. Jump into Slack. Or Discord or whatever community platform they're using. And the nice thing is that there's really low barriers to entry. And what I found, for example, in the Developer Marketing Alliance communities, and I also am part of the Product Marketing Alliance, is there, you know, in my own mantra is the only stupid question is the one not asked. Yeah. And you see a huge range of questions being asked in these channels from people who clearly are veteran practitioners who are really sophisticated and looking to up the game. Perhaps they're moving into a new niche in the industry. The flip side, folks who are like, help, it's my first day on the job. I've never been a developer marketer before or product marketer. And overall, the way people engage with the questions is really, really positive. And so I would say, don't be afraid to jump in and ask questions. Either someone else is thinking the exact same thing, or someone else had to answer that exact same question 5, 10, 15 years ago. And they're so excited to be there to support you. And it's because we all believe in the practice of what we do. And we want to ensure it has the greatest impact, that there's a really, really strong pipeline of talent coming up. I'm going to caveat all of that with AI because that's lurking all over everybody's head. But that we have a really strong pipeline of talent and that we can have the biggest impact and be really, really clear and consistent with companies of who we are, what we do, and why we need to exist.
And honestly, the last thing that I'll double down on that you mentioned is just kind of reaffirming that it is, at least in my experience, it's been such a welcoming space. People really tend to care about the community, to care about the work. Like you have to love it if you're in this space. You really genuinely do. And that's been my experience, whether it is, you know, the Developer Marketing Alliance, whether it is some of the other Discords or Slack groups, that everyone just genuinely cares, is welcoming, loves to answer questions. So I would double down on that and say to anyone who's thinking about getting involved or looking for support or resources or community, whatever that might be, dip a toe in, and we'll link some of the resources that we've talked about, some of the groups, some of the Discord and Slack channels that we've talked about in this episode below. Katie, this was fantastic. As always, always enjoy the opportunities I have for us to chat. Is there anything else you want to end with before we go our separate ways?
Oh, my mantra to everyone is the importance of curiosity, flexibility, and always be learning. as optimistic as I want to be, I see the reality of how things are changing, particularly with AI and just with lean budgets and lean organizations that don't seem to be growing as fast as we want to.
Yeah.
There is so much transferability of knowledge and experience. Recognize what you've accomplished in your other roles and how transferable those are into the DevRel and dev marketing space. And this space is constantly changing. The tech that I worked on when I first started in this space, like ads APIs to automate advertising. I mean, that sounds so quaint now. And where it's come in the last 15 years, having that curious, always be learning mindset will serve you really, really well, whether you stay in this space or venture onto another space. So those are my parting words of wisdom.
There we go. Couldn't picture a better place to end the conversation. Katie, one more time, just want to say thank you for joining us. It was great to see you, and hopefully we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you. Thank you for the chance. Thank you. Bye-bye.